Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the equipment and setup that Richard Avedon used during his American West project. Love it or hate it, the American West is a seminal series, quintessential Richard Avedon series that photographed 750 different people. He used 17,000 sheets of film, so 20 sheets of film per person on average. It was a big project. It was over 4 years, self-funded, and he and 2 assistants went out, just drove around the American West and photographed people at diners, gas stations, county fairs, all sorts of things. So today we're going to look at how he set up that project, how he would set up the shots, and look at the type of equipment that he used. So we're going to start off ground up. The first thing he used, big metal tripod. Now I'm using my Manfrotto 161 tripod. The one that he used was a Majestic made in Chicago in the US, and it was a big metal tripod. You can still get them. They're on the used market, eBay, all over the place. So if you really want one, you can go ahead and get one. On top of that, he used an 8x10 wooden clamshell camera made by Deerdorf and Sons, also from Chicago. The camera that I'm using today is my Kodak Master. It's a metal version of the Deerdorf, so very, very similar in style, but made out of metal instead of wood. But it should give you a pretty good idea of what he used. Then the lens. He only used one lens for the entire project, and that was a 360 millimeter Schneider Simar S. That's the same lens that we're using today. Now, mine is in a Copal 3 shutter. His would have been in a Prontor 3 shutter, or a professional Prontor 3. The difference between those, mine, you have to cock the shutter to fire it every time, and the Prontor 3 you do not. So one action of the cable would both cock and fire the shutter, and that would allow him to stand next to the camera and just engage with the subject and just fire, fire, fire. And we know that because when he was working, he had 2 assistants that would just load film holder after film holder because he shot relatively quickly, and nobody was there to cock the shutter in between. And he did not want to break with his subject, so he didn't turn around, cock the shutter, fire, cock the shutter, and fire. He would just hold the cable, engage with the person being photographed, and just click, click, click. Sometimes there was film in the camera, sometimes there wasn't. He just fired. It was up to his assistants to get the film into the camera fast enough to capture what he was doing. So I've got my little stand in here to make sure that I'm in the right place. He did not have any lighting equipment. All he did was tape up a piece of white seamless paper. I'm using a 4-foot piece. He used a 9-foot. So this still works because it's just a single person. And I've got the seamless completely within the frame. For a stand-in, I've got my styrofoam head, and I'm focused on it. What I'm going to be doing is using a piece of string. It's tied to the camera. There's a knot in this end that will just go right up to my eye. And so I'll stand in the place, put it against my eye, drop it, fire. And that's how we're going to take a picture today. It's a great way to get a self-portrait. I realize some of you may wonder why I keep doing self-portraits and not get a model. Well, I'm affordable within my price range, and I always show up on time. So that's why I use myself. So we're ready to go. The camera was set up where it was a little bit higher than the sitter and pointing downward just a touch. That's the way that we have it here. And what that did was it got the person being photographed to lift their eyes up a little bit. We're stopped down to about f32 for depth of field, so that even tilted at an angle, I should have my waist and legs, or whatever's in the frame, still in focus. And we should be good to go. I've got a very, very long air actuated plunger, and my hands may or may not be in the shot depending on how we pose here. I'm going to do a few different, see what we get. Film wise, he used Kodak Tri-X. That film no longer exists in the same form that it did in the early 1980s. The current Tri-X 320 sheet film is going to be your closest to that. We're using FOMA 100 because that's what I have, and I'm not going to go out and buy a $150 box of film for this video. We might do that in the future, but not today. Then if you ever look up his work and how he worked, you would see that he had a kind of homemade lens shade on there. I have one as well, and that's because the diameter of that 360 millimeter lens is bigger than any lens shade you can buy. So have a homemade one on here and it will work just fine. We're going to go ahead and focus the camera, make sure everything is where we need to be. I've got a mark on the ground for me to stand on. And then we're going to take some shots. Go in the darkroom, we're going to develop it. He sent his work to a lab. He did not process his own film. And the lab used just stock D76, most likely replenished in a deep tank. And then he had a printer that would print the work. And we're going to do that today as well. So let's get the dark cloth up and focus. All right, I'm happy with where we're at on the focus. I'm using my dark cloth as kind of a shield on the bellows and the film holder because the camera's in direct sunlight. I've got my lens shade here, which is doing its job. Let's see if we can extend this a little bit just to make sure we're fully shaded. We don't want any flare. And I think we are ready to go. So let's get our light meter. He overexposed his film a little bit. He rated his Tri-X at 200. I'm rating my FOMA at 80. And we're at f32 and a half at half a second. And that's about right. Using 400 speed film at 200, he would have been stopped down to about 32 or 45 because he often had subjects in this shade lighting with exposures in the 1 to half second time, so he had to make sure that they could stand still for that. So we're going to make sure we're in that area. Half a second is good. All right, let's load up some film. Move that guy out of the way. And I'm going to unmic myself. Let's do a little music montage as I do some shots. All right, I think we have got the shots that we want. We've got 6 of them. We'll see how this works. So let's go ahead and go in the darkroom. I've got some D76 we can mix up. We're going to develop it, see how they turned out. Avedon didn't process his own film. He didn't print his own prints. He had a lab do that work for him. The sheets would have been put in metal hangers like this. Now this is for 4x5, so a larger 8x10 size, and then developed in a large tank such as this. Again, much larger, probably around a 3.5 gallon size. You can see how that kind of processing goes in one of my very first videos on how to agitate film using different methods, and I show the deep tank agitation cycle. So if you want to see more of that, you can check out that video. What we're going to do today is just tray process. We're going to use stock D76 just like the lab he used. So I've got a few different trays. I've got a water tray for pre-wet, the D76 stock bath fix. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up. We're going to develop the film, and then we will look at the results. And we can see from those results that sort of lighting worked exactly the same, because it is the same. It's just a white piece of paper taped to a wall in the shade, camera pointing at it. Something you can certainly do on your own if you want that sort of Avedon look. And then of course it's got the black film border around it, which gives that distinctive look. So get out there and make some. The lens that I used, 360mm, it's only 20% longer than the normal 300mm lens for an 8x10, which means if you're going to scale that down to other cameras, a 180 on 4x5. If you're shooting medium format, say 6x7, the normal lens is 90mm. 20% longer would be 110 approximately. If you're shooting 35mm, then 40 to 50 is normal, depending on how you interpret normal for that camera. So a 50 to 60mm lens would be appropriate for that same 20% increase over normal length. You don't have to use a lens of that focal length at all for any of those formats, but it does create, as you can see earlier in the video, a nice distance between camera and subject. A shorter lens, camera's going to be a lot closer and may not have that same interaction. Longer lens, you're going to be much further away. So for his style of work, Avedon liked that 360 for the distance that gave him. He could be close enough to get them to open up, but far enough away to give some people their space. So practice around with it, play around, see what you come up with. And as you can see, my modeling career is probably not going to be taking off anytime soon. No big deal. Like I said, I am just always there and I'm free. So if you want to play around with it, you can certainly shoot friends, family, hire a model, go out and just set up against a wall at a county fair like he did and see what you come up with. So thank you all very much for watching. If you would like to help support this channel, you can go down to the super thanks down underneath that little heart, and you can make a donation for one time specifically for this video, or you can join my membership and have an ongoing support for this channel that does help me get the supplies and materials to make these videos for you. So I do appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.